Welcome to the Defend Threat Insights weekly group conversation. We'll jump right in because we're all business today.
All business.
Jonathan missed all the fun.
Is it recorded?
No, we just started recording. We cut off the fun.
Shoot! I was running back with my coffee. Can y'all just kind of go over what y'all were talking about?
At the end, it's on the agenda. We'll get there. Don't worry. All right, we're going to start with follow-up from previous conversations. Alexander, go ahead.
I just want to, so there's been some advancements in the GraphQL pagination issue that was reported way back when Sam tried to add pagination to the security dashboard. It apparently has been fixed. The ticket to investigate pagination on the security dashboard with GraphQL has been updated per Mehmet and Savash. Thank you. And there's still some performance concerns, but this is a good step forward. Any questions? Dope. Lindsay, you're next.
So yeah, like you said, we have a spike for that, the technical spike in 13.2. So that information will feed that investigation, and then we'll decide what we're going to do with that, hopefully shortly thereafter. So my item keeps coming up, and I figured we should talk about it here. We have this notification when a vulnerability is resolved. The notification happens in two places, on the standalone page and then also on the dashboard. And we have a sneaking suspicion that the dashboard notification is not working. It was implemented, it was tested, it doesn't, we can't see it when we'd expect to see it now. So there's just been a lot of conversation and issues, and I figured, per our handbook, once we have a few back and forths, we should bring it to a synchronous discussion. Unfortunately, I don't know. I didn't ask anyone to look into this in advance. Does anyone have any background on this that they want to share? I think it was Sam Beckham that originally implemented this in the front end. Has anyone looked at this at all? That's on this call? Like Jonathan or Savash?
I mean, I've looked at it briefly. I guess I didn't realize that it was supposed to be working, but it wasn't. I thought it was something new that we were going to be implementing.
That's why I wanted to bring it to this forum, to make sure that that was aware. So hopefully it's not the same level of effort of implementing it, from stage one, and that we're looking for a broken piece. So this could just really kind of change the approach to how to handle this issue. I'd hate to have two implementations side by side and not realize it.
I know I've seen the banner for this has been resolved in your default branch on the vulnerability page, but I've never seen it on the security dashboard.
Right, so that's a good call out, Alexander. So the customers do still have this information, but they have to click all the way through to the vulnerability detail page to see it. As far as we know, that's still working correctly. We should probably put a little bit of effort into testing to confirm that, but given that the standalone page isn't using GraphQL and that the dashboards are, I'm not sure how much reusability there is there between those two areas or implementations. This isn't 13.2, so we can also kind of look at this as a planning breakdown. And again, the main reason I wanted to bring this to everyone's attention was just to make sure that everyone was aware that this was working at a certain point. It was verified, I believe even in production based on the comments on the issue. So we're really kind of recategorizing this issue as a bug now because it's popped back up.
So just making sure I'm clear. So we're not showing the proper status for resolved issues. That's on the dashboard.
Not showing the badge.
The badge. Is it just the badge?
Just the badge. And it's a special badge for vulnerabilities that are no longer a master, but their status is anything except for resolved. So if their status is not resolved, but they're no longer a master, we should show the badge.
Okay.
Maybe I'm totally missing the point, but would it not make more sense to just automatically update the status of a vulnerability when the scan against master occurs and we realize that something is missing? Just update that, or do we not have the ability to see up the chain like that?
I think we wanted to do the manual update because that's like a verification and resolution step from the user, right? Because they'll have to go in and make sure that vulnerability is no longer there, as opposed to just accepting that it's been automatically resolved. But that sounds like a feature too.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, why it seems like the backend mechanism to do the display of the the state inconsistency would allow us to just make that determination anyway. But
That's an interesting tie into, if we did the auto resolution, we would need that additional state to reopened. So we could do the auto resolution, but there's much more conversation to have. Yeah.
You guys are scope creeping, is what you're doing right now?
Oh, definitely.
well,
yeah.
I don't want to think of this as scope creeping as opposed to just sort of like swapping one for the other. Like, why are we showing something instead of?
Well,
this
whatever
feels
we
like
swap, we would need to make updates to be consistent in the standalone page as well. I mean, the messaging that we have to the customer in the standalone page says verify the vulnerability has been remediated before changing its status. So this is very much an intentional customer workflow move here. So if you want us to hold off on fixing the remediation badge on the dashboard because you want to take this a different direction, that would be different. I don't want to repurpose this bug that popped up from a feature that's not working anymore to do something different, because now we've gotten several states of confused.
That's fair. Yeah, let's go ahead and just push this forward. I mean, this has existed for a long time, so I think it needs to be re-verified that this is actually wanted and useful. So we can address that separately, but let's go for parity first, and then we'll fix it later, change it later.
Good to know that you guys are going to be discussing this and that there might be a change in this behavior in the future. But for right now, we're going back to what the original goal was of displaying this badge as an informational badge, but not actually updating the status of the vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Sweet. All right. So this is assigned right now to Jonathan and Savash for, I think, are you comfortable saying that we're kind of in a refinement with this bug? I don't think we really need planning breakdown, unless if you guys feel like the issue itself needs to be, Savash's mic is not working. We can read, you have something to say. I can read it in your voice if you would like.
Well, Savash is typing. I will say that some of the things that Matt was talking about with detecting whether or not it exists in the current branch, that kind of goes back to making sure that the vulnerabilities line up. We lost Savash. My screen just changed. There's a related issue. I believe it'd be related to the one that Philippe brought up, where if the branch goes away, being able to track it in the new branch or the master branch, and being able to connect those. And so getting that part working would probably allow us to be able to track if it had been remediated or not. Otherwise, we're having to track like line numbers, and even those can get off from branch to branch.
Yeah, I think that's part of a bigger conversation around how the fingerprinting is done. I'm trying to resist going down the path of this team being responsible for actually going up into the source code and checking the diffs. So especially since it doesn't really make a lot of sense when you look at things like container scanning or DAS scanning, when it's more like the source code line numbers don't really apply. But I think there's a lot more thought we need to put into this, because I can almost see some people preferring to try to have the auto resolution where possible for efficiency. But then I think, Andy, that's a fair point, that if a human wants to go in and verify that something was actually not just removed but fixed properly, because if I'm lazy, I might just change the name of something and it's not there anymore, but I actually left the vulnerability anyway. Yeah, I think that's part of a bigger conversation.
Shall I?
Yeah, it works. Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Great. I first said that I didn't check this this issue, but I actually even commented there, so I did. I just forgot. I think the issue is because while moving to GraphQL, we didn't. So the backend doesn't provide a flag, so the front end misses this information. It's even the comment. I think I confirmed that with Ellen. So there should be some backend work here first, and then if it's not implemented, then we can work on the front end part. So this is all I had to say.
Thank you. No, it looks like you've already done some investigation into this. We see a bit where the breakage is. So I guess from a priority perspective, Matt, is this, I mean, this is sitting here at 13.2 right now. That's okay? You don't want to bump anything out of 13.1? I mean, we're...
Not for this. This seems
okay, good.
fairly...
Good answer. You passed the test.
Well, I mean, it is a P4 S4, so it's...
Right.
My answer should align with that, or the labels are wrong. No, I don't think anybody's complaining about this right now. It's handy information, but it's not critical.
Cool. Thanks. All right, we've got some demos. Thank you, Savas and Alexander. So if anyone got I did not have an opportunity to watch them yet. If anyone did and has any questions or comments that they want to share, now's your time. Cool, thank you. I'll be looking at those later. I hope everybody else does as well. And we are on to planning breakdown. Matt, I'll let you talk.
All right, let's we'll open up the first one here. Looks like Alexander and Andy had an exchange on questions.
I'm just going to share this ticket so we have something to look at instead of each other's faces.
So I guess the first thing to point out is we're still in design on this one. So this is more so everybody can be aware of this issue and start thinking about it early. I know that's been kind of we'll say universal request is to get things that we're working on in front of engineering and get your feedback on what looks like we're going down a path of extreme technical difficulty or impossibility early. But this is going to be one of the areas of focus that we're going to be looking at. Probably this is going to be the next immediate large chunk of work. So the MR security report or the MR security widget or whatever we decide to probably needs a better name is, there we go, Lindsay has it pulled up right there. It's that little thing right in the middle that shows the scans in the MR itself. So there is a company-wide initiative to actually redo a lot of this information in general, just because looking at it, it's hard to read. There's a lot going on here. There are inconsistencies between the different little components and widgets, and we want to try to simplify this down so that users aren't really getting information blindness, which is happening today. Either people are not clicking on expand because they don't know that's the thing that they can do for the security information, or they do, and right now it lists every single scanner with every single result found in that branch and just this weird nested hell of multi-scrolling within little windows. It's not good. So hopefully everybody has had a chance to look at that, and if not, we would certainly appreciate some eyes on it and feedback on the direction that we're going. So I think, Lindsay, maybe we don't need to spend a ton of time on this right now since it's not quite at the planning breakdown, but if anybody had any questions, comments, or feedback right now that you want to discuss on this call, that'd be you.
So it looks like we're keeping the modal and not using a standalone page in that case. Is that right, Andy?
Yeah, just for the MR page, maybe even consistent with the pipeline page, because we don't want to take them out of the MR. I think the modal will suffice for now.
And one thing that I've kind of confirmed informally with a lot of people, but I want to say it out loud to this group so you guys can tell me if I'm wrong. The MR security information should always be pulled from findings. It should not be pulled from standalone vulnerabilities based on the definition of when a finding gets promoted to be a standalone vulnerability. We're looking at the results from that pipeline run. We're not looking at what's been merged into the default branch. And that's why when we did the standalone vulnerabilities MVC, we left the pipeline view alone. That should not change, correct?
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm looking at Jonathan and Alan right now, specifically backend engineers. Does that sound correct to you?
It makes sense. I don't necessarily remember that conversation specifically, but it makes sense.
I guess
I don't
Oh,
think
sorry.
I've changed anything that would.
It's on recording now, so it just, I mean, I don't know if we've actually formally had this conversation. I know, this has come up, discussion with Ross and, other people, but over the course of, 6 months. So just putting this here on the table, the MR pipeline view should always be backed by findings based on what the definition of a finding versus a standalone vulnerability is.
Yeah, because the findings are based off the pipelines. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think, Lindsay, some of the confusion around this is that it's the difference between functionally versus the technical implementation side. Standalone vulnerabilities, if things go as planned, that just sort of goes away. No one talks about that anymore. They're just vulnerabilities, because that's not really a thing in the industry. And a finding is really just something that we have noticed in one of the feature branches. And it is not, we're just trying to flag something in the delta between that and the target branch, which for right now is always the default branch, master in most cases. Eventually in the future, we'll want to allow for things like having that functionality work for other target branches. For instance, a lot of big companies, especially if they have a compiled applications desktop software, they may have their release branch and then a couple of older maintenance branches, for instance. So findings are just things that haven't been merged into the target yet. And so for the MR and the pipeline for now, that's where they are. If we want to use SAV architecture under the covers, that's none of my business.
Right now, when findings are found, do we pull out the ones that are vulnerabilities in master currently, or do we just show them all?
In the MR?
Yeah,
We
or
only show the
pipeline,
diff.
whatever.
The MR, we show the diff. The pipeline page is both.
Okay.
It's like the appendix as an organ of our stuff right now. It's like, it's doing something, but we don't quite know what value it's providing.
Got
And
it.
also, most people don't know where it is. Is it on the left side? Is it on the right side? Is it front, the back? I don't know. It's in there somewhere.
It takes like 10 clicks to get there. There's like half of those clicks are like dummy clicks.
The problem's not really there at the beginning anyways.
Yeah. Got it. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, one final note on that issue, the MR issue. It's not intended to be one iteration. It would be great if it could be, but I kind of just dumped an entire end-to-end experience in there for us to kind of break down collaboratively. So whatever we need to like pull out or parse into a different milestone, that's fine.
Yeah, that's a great point. We haven't really gone through that exercise as a team yet, where this is, Andy and I are kind of coming with a particular thing, and we need input on how to slice it down, how to break it down into the MVCs. And so that's kind of what this start of the conversation is here, is how can we start chunking this out into deliverable pieces, which, I mean, this may very well take 1 to 3 iterations to get all of the pieces.
So great segue. How do we want to, so you're still in design with this, Andy. Correct me if I'm wrong, the design work that you still have remaining to do shouldn't block this planning breakdown discussion that you guys are wanting to happen?
Probably not. So I think 13.2, we're going to take this into solution validation with the internal AppSec team. I think it's still good to like form an opinion on how to break this down, but there may be small changes happening. If there were big changes, I would be incredibly surprised, but it's recorded, so I'll hold myself to that.
Okay, so we won't even be starting work on this in 13.2 if you're in the problem validation phase. So we've got a lot of time. I don't know if everyone on this call has had a chance to look at this MVC issue to start to wrap your head around how you would like to see this broken down into multiple issues, or how we can embrace our iteration training that you've all completed to make this not a repeat of our standalone vulnerabilities MVC, as well as maybe familiarize ourselves with this code a bit more, because we haven't been working in this pipeline view up until now. So is that something that we should, divide and spend time and then come back into the next planning session and keep this item on the agenda? Or has anyone had a chance to dig into this enough to have opinion about it today?
From my side, I would suggest, I didn't have that much time to look on this. So maybe if we keep it here and then we do the planning next week, it's better.
We have
I
lots of
second
time.
that.
Cool. Moving on then. So this will remain on our agenda for probably the next few weeks, because even once we get through an initial discussion, I imagine, you know, we'll want to look at that a little bit further. Maybe some of those items we break off could even be broken down smaller. So the second item listed here is approved messaging when filtering on the security dashboard. Okay, so our generic error message of when no vulnerabilities are found. And right now, correct me if I'm wrong, it just looks like an error message, like your connection has failed or something along those lines. It's very vague. So this is about capturing that scenario and putting something. Go ahead.
I think this one's a little bit different. So what Wayne, he's got captured there. It's when you filter it down, it's actually misleading. It makes it look like even though you've got vulnerabilities, you haven't configured the project correctly. So it's basically showing you bad information when you filter to a state where the filter is returning no information or no vulnerabilities. So it's hopefully this one's pretty straightforward. It's just swapping out the bad message for one that actually makes a little bit more sense.
So as far as I remember, this is valid for group and instance level dashboards. As you said, it's if the user has configured the project and then filters out, then we display the message as if they still haven't configured the project. So probably it should be just an if else. And if the user has configured projects and then have no vulnerabilities, then display this message. Otherwise, display the initial, because we probably need to keep this message for the initial state, like when the user still haven't configured the. Sorry, it should be just an if else. I believe we have that information that it's configured. No, I'm sorry. We don't have that information because we need to make a call that's dynamic. So the server, and that will create, so we need a loading state probably, because first we need to display the user that something is loading, and then if the project is configured, then display this message, otherwise display that message. Otherwise, because right now we default to one message, so we don't have the loading state, so we would probably need to add the loading state as well. Or the server, the backend needs to provide us this value when the page loads, like initially.
One question about what you just said, Savash. You said that it only applied to the instance and group level dashboards. I see this on the project level dashboard as well. So I think I believe it applies to all three. I'm just looking at the filter. I'm looking at the project run right now, and I applied some filters, and I see the same message of no vulnerabilities found. So
yeah,
I think it's all three.
It wouldn't need to apply to all three, since you can filter on all three of the levels.
Yeah.
It'd be different to think about it if like the results are greater than 0. And if user applies filter and the results are 0, then we show that. If else, we show results or the other empty state.
This could this can work now because I just merged the filter state. So it's being merged. So we can read the filters from the URL using that one. So we can say if the user applied filters and there are no listings, then findings, then we can. Yeah, that could work. That's a great idea, actually.
Yeah, so that'll work as long as we aren't applying default filters, probably. So if right now our default filters are basically all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll keep that in mind on the design side if we're going to be prescribing like default filters too.
Seems like the mechanism would be the same though. If you're having to make the call to check and you're checking with the filters applied, you would still have that state that something was configured, but the current filter had nothing. It would look stupid for you as a user to have it configured to a state where it always just showed, hey, your filter has nothing here. But maybe I do only want to see critical unresolved, and maybe everybody's on top of stuff, so the majority of the time it's not. But it seems like it would work the same, and that's just a user choice how to set the default filter.
Yeah.
Savash, you mentioned that there could potentially be backend work depending on whether we solve this with some sort of a loading or not. Right now, this issue is only flagged for front end. So if, as we're refining this, you think that would be a better solution, let's make sure we update this to add the backend label and get some eyes from the backend engineers on it. And also go ahead, sorry.
Actually, with Andy's solution, I think we don't need backend.
Okay.
Because we can read from the URL, so we have an initial state, so we
Gotcha.
don't need to make the initial call.
Okay. And then Andy, are you done with the designs on this? Because the workflow state on this is off. So I'll update this and put it into refinement. And since Savash has all sorts of opinions on it, he's probably going to land with this one on his lap to further refine and add a weight. Tiago and I are working to improve the definition of what's expected by engineers in the refinement phase. This was part of the feedback that we heard from you guys during the retrospective. So expect some more communications around that. Just make sure that, you know, and I've seen people do this more, but as you're refining issues, make sure you're updating the problem description, you know, put as much detail as you can about what you're finding during the refinement, not just adding a weight to it based on, you know, what you think should happen. That's not very helpful for the next person. Not that you do that, Savash. I'm not targeting this at you in any way. All right, we've got 2 more minutes. Was there any more questions on that one at all before the last one will just take a second. I think it'll be very fast. Okay, so Matt mentioned earlier that eventually we're just gonna have vulnerabilities and they won't be standalone or first class or whatever. So that might affect how we approach this issue that I created. But one thing that came out of the standalone vulnerabilities retrospective a few weeks ago was the confusion of the naming conventions and what we call these things. So we decided at the time to create an issue to make sure that we remove references to first class vulnerabilities in the code. Whether we replace that with standalone or just refer to them as vulnerabilities, I'm not sure based on other references to the term vulnerabilities in the code what makes the most sense from a development perspective. So this issue is around cleanup from the fun dance that we had around terminology for standalone vulnerabilities.
And I see Alexander has left a question to that exact point for the front end team and me. So I will respond on the issue, but the short answer I think is yes, that standalone vulnerabilities was something for us to just kind of distinguish between old and new. And in fact, if everyone saw posted in, I think it was in the Defend channel this morning, it looks like the secure team is creating a glossary of terms. They've actually outlined vulnerabilities as well as findings in there. I don't believe they had standalone vulnerabilities in there. So yeah, certainly in support of that going forward.
This issue, it also contains backend work, right? In the database, do we need to rename columns?
So Jonathan, you've got an epic right now around a lot of database column naming cleanup. Does that involve getting rid of the first class terminology or put it?
No, that is the going from occurrences to findings.
Okay.
I don't know if we actually have like standalone or first class or anything like that in the actual code. I don't believe we do.
And maybe that's why we pegged this as a front end issue when we talked about it during the retro, because yeah, we've all got to drop. It's 9:30. If there is back end changes, we could either create another issue or we can encapsulate it in this one. I wasn't sure what the answer to that question was either, Savash.
I also have not seen like standalone or first class in the DB when I was digging around there with Jonathan, though I did see, like Jonathan said, a lot of occurrences. So
I think the documentation is going to be the main place we need to look for stuff.
That's a good call out. I'll add that to a comment in this issue, Jonathan. Thanks. Or at least in the description, not a comment. Follow my own advice. All right. So I don't know if this, do you guys feel like this could move past planning breakdown into refinement, or should we bring this back to next discussion? I see some nodding heads. Alexander and Savash are nodding their heads. Jonathan and Alan, do you guys think this is okay to move on? I would like someone from the back end just to confirm that there's no references to update on the back end, but it sounds like you guys are pretty confident that it might just be front end.
Yeah, we can move it on. I think the only thing that does reference first class vulnerabilities is the feature flag. So I think
Right.
Alan's
Okay.
MR is still sitting out there to remove that.
We do have another ticket around the feature flag and cleaning up around that feature flag. So
Yeah.
I can relate those as well. That's a good
Yeah,
point.
So we can probably move forward on actually yanking out that code at this point too.
Yeah, I agree. We're confident enough that things are working, I think. All right, everyone. Thank you for the extra time. I will post this recording on Slack and YouTube. Talk to you later.
Bye, friends.
Yeah.
Bye.